Now let's take a look at the actions that we define in our model. For example, let's take a look at one of the simplest actions, show homepage. Let me switch back to the UML for a second. You can see here is the workflow. As the user starts the test, he logs into the system. First thing that he's supposed to see is he's supposed to see the main screen. So we have an action here, show the homepage. Let's take a look at it. This is the definition of the show homepage. We say that a record homepage is going to be displayed, and we set certain fields in it to the values that we expect. For example, the title will be set to SugarCRM, and then X and Y coordinates of a particular element that we're looking for are going to be set to concrete values, and then we send out this record on the outbound channel that we defined before. And where did we get these values, SugarCRM 200 and 150? These were lifted directly from the spec. So if we had a spec that said the title, when the homepage is displayed, is supposed to be set to SugarCRM, this is what we encode. And then if the spec says there's going to be a certain image present at 200 and 150 as the coordinates, this is what we encode into our model. In a similar fashion, we encode everything else. For example, if we want to show the context, we say there is some kind of storage. We're working on a very abstract level here, on a very high level. In reality, we've got MySQL database pulling out all the records, but we're not interested in all the database properties or in the persistence layer, how it works. We just say there exists some kind of a storage, and it is full of certain contexts, and we're just going to iterate over the storage, pull them out, and send them to the user, and they're going to be displayed on the page. So you can see we skipped a lot of work here because we're operating on a much higher level than the actual system under test. And now that the actions have been defined, this is the end of the manual effort. From now on, we can generate the tests and see what kind of tests will be generated by the engine automatically. So let me go ahead, select the project, and the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to compile and check it for syntactical correctness. Here's my console window popping up. Let me resize it a little bit so it's a little bit nicer. And here we can see that the IDE submitted the model for the computation for syntactical verification, and the model has been parsed, and the compiler said, yes, there are no errors, and the compilation is complete. What we have here is we have a client-server model. The client is the IDE, which you're looking at now, and then I have a computational service also running on my laptop. In reality, the computational service could be run on a standalone server with multiple cores, and multiple clients could be connecting to it simultaneously for processing the models. So you can have several testers designing models and generating the tests at the same time. Now that the compilation is complete, let's go ahead and generate the tests. So I'm going to submit the model for actual computation. And you can see that the console here says that 2 computational slaves have been allocated, and the reason for that is that I've got a dual-core processor on this particular laptop, so the computational service is able to take advantage of that. And now if you put it on some blade server with 8 or 4 cores, there are going to be 8 and 4 computational nodes allocated accordingly. So the model has been checked, and 14 test cases have been generated. Now let me start bringing in other windows into the view, and the first thing that we're going to take a look at is the generated tests. So you can see this is the list, this is the view with the list of test cases generated, and we got 1 through 14 generated here. Let's take a look at the tests themselves. So let me start bringing in more windows. I'm a little bit short on real estate here, so bear with me as I resize the windows accordingly. So test case 1. Let's take a look at test case 1. So this is our test case 1. I'm going to resize this out. And remember, everything from now on is auto-generated. There is no manual effort involved. We define the model, we define the workflow, the behavior in the UML, and we define the action, how the system responds to the tester stimuli. And now we see the resulting generated tests. So this is you, the tester, and this is our system under test, the SugarCRM. And you can see that the first thing, as you start the test, the first thing you're supposed to see is the home page. Right? And we can see the particular values that we expect from the system. So as we coded it in, we'll say the title is supposed to be set to SugarCRM, and then X and Y coordinates are set to 200 and 150 respectively. And then this is where the engine kicks in. We didn't think about particular scenarios, use case scenarios, when we coded up the model. Let's switch to the UML workflow again. Right? Typically, when you generate a test manually, you think of the possible actions that the user could take. Here we take a different approach. You say, these are the pages that the user could visit, and these are potential actions that the user could take. Let the engine figure out all the possible scenarios of user interacting with the system. And this is what the engine does. So in the first scenario, the engine says, well, the user could make a click, and then the click could be set to accounts. And if that happens, then the user is supposed to see the accounts page. Right? Let's take a look at test case number 5. The first few tests are fairly simplistic as the engine starts to parse the model that we created, and as it sort of traverses it deeper, it generates more and more complex test cases. So test case number 5, I'm just choosing test cases at random here. So everything starts with the home page. The first thing that the user sees is the home page. There is no way that we can go around it because that's how we coded up the model. And then the user makes a click, and this time the user goes to contacts. And the contacts page is displayed. And then the user makes another click, and he decides to add a contact, for example, right? And this time he is supposed to see an add a contact page displayed, and again, there are certain properties set on that contacts page. So title is supposed to be set to contacts, and subtitle is supposed to be set to contact information. Now let's take a look at one of the bottom tests here. You can see that they're significantly more complex than what we started out with initially. So this is you as a tester, but now we got two independent interfaces operating together on the same backend. So the first user is using the browser interface. He logs in. The first thing that he sees is the home page. Remember, all the values are displayed in the view on the right. Then he makes a click, and this time he wants to add a contact. And the first user is supposed to see add a contact page. Now, at the same time, the second user comes in. But this time, this second user is operating through web services. And while the first user is filling out information on the add a contact page, the second user is submitting a request. And we said, we're going to let the harness fill in the values here. So we're putting the certain placeholders in place here. So the second user adds a contact, receives a SOAP response back, and then as soon as he's done, the first user tries to add the same contact. And now what happens? The system is supposed to detect the duplicates, and then the duplicates page is displayed. And if the user confirms, then this contact is added, and the details of the added contact are displayed back to the user. And then the user, so the user confirms, and then the details of the added contact are displayed back to the user. And then maybe the user makes another click and goes to the contacts page. Now, this test case deals with a case where the user confirms that he wants to add a duplicate account. And of course, there's going to be a case where the user cancels. So let me just find it right here. So test case number 13 is practically identical, except this time the first user decides not to add a duplicate account, and then he goes back to the contacts page. Let's take a look at these little purple R's that we see interspersed between the actions. These are the requirements that we put into the model. Let's take a look at those here. So you can see practically on every transition there is a requirement keyword, and doesn't necessarily have to go to into the UML diagram. It can go into the code here as well. So I might as well, whoops. I could actually place a requirement in the model here. So for example, if we check for duplicates, I could place something like check for duplicates here. And it will be just as effective. Now, what this does is it generates a traceability matrix for you. And it allows you to see how the generated tests map to the portions of the model that you created. The traceability matrix allows you to map the generated tests to the portions of the model that you created. You can see that we've got a matrix here with 14 test cases generated on the top, and then all of our requirements that we entered into the model present in the list here. The requirements can be grouped. For example, we got a group P0 as 1 and a group P1, and you can see that homepage requirement is covered in every single test because that's how we enter into the system, and then the rest are interspersed between the tests here. And of course, everything is clickable, and we can choose test case number 11, take a look at the steps and the values used.